Imagine a letter arriving at your door. You open it to find strange symbols, mysterious codes no one can crack. The writer calls himself Zodiac. He warns that, if his message isn't printed, something terrible will happen. An entire city freezes in fear. Schools close early. Streets empty before sunset. Parents grip their children's hands a little tighter. Behind every shadow, he could be watching, waiting. The police, journalists, and detectives all try to hunt him down, but Zodiac slips away like a ghost. This isn't just a story of murder. It's a chilling mystery that continues to haunt investigators to this day. It was December 20th, 1968, on Lake Herman Road near Benicia, California. The cold winter night was still, with stars scattered across the sky. Inside a parked car sat 17-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 16-year-old David Faraday, sharing dreams, laughter, and whispers about the future. They had no idea that this would be the last night of their young lives. Suddenly, headlights appeared behind them. A vehicle pulled up, its beams drowning their car in light. An unknown man stepped out, and in a flash, gunshots shattered the silence. Betty Lou tried to run, but was struck down, falling lifeless on the cold ground. David was shot at close range, collapsing beside the car. Within moments, the peaceful night had turned into a scene of horror. The police investigation begins. Police arrived to find a chilling scene. Blood on the gravel, empty shell casings, and 2 young lives lost forever. There were no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no clear motive. The case was confusing. There was no sign of robbery, no evidence of personal conflict, just cold-blooded murder. Local newspapers reported the killings, and fear quietly settled over families in the area. Parents began telling their children not to stay out too late, but no one knew that this was only the beginning of something far darker. Fear spreads across the city 6 months later. On July 4th, 1969, the city's fragile sense of normalcy was shattered. At Blue Rock Springs Park in 22-year-old Darlene Farron and 19-year-old Michael Mago were sitting in a parked car, enjoying the warm summer night and watching fireworks from a distance. A car pulled up behind them, and a man stepped out with a flashlight in hand, pointing it into their vehicle. Suddenly, gunshots rang out, the air filled with panic and screams. Darlene was critically injured and died at the hospital. Michael survived and was able to give police a description of the attacker: a stocky man with light brown, curly hair. A letter that changed everything just days later. On July 31st, 1969, 3 newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, received handwritten letters. Each letter described the Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs murders in detail that only the killer would know. Enclosed was a strange cipher made up of odd symbols, circles with crosses, and letters. The writer demanded that the newspapers print the cipher on their front pages, or he would strike again. At the end of each letter were chilling words. "Greater than this is the Zodiac speaking." For the first time, the city learned the name of the shadow haunting them: Zodiac. The mystery of the cipher. The newspapers printed the Zodiac cipher, hoping someone could crack the code and help the police identify the killer. Military codebreakers, amateur detectives, and everyday citizens all tried to decode the message. Finally, a high school teacher and his wife managed to break part of the code. However, it didn't reveal the killer's identity or motive. Instead, it showed the Zodiac's desire for attention and control, keeping the city under a cloud of fear. Threats that shook a city. The Zodiac didn't stop at letters. He threatened to attack school buses, claiming he would target children if his demands were not met. This sent a wave of panic across Northern California. Police began escorting school buses, and parents refused to let their children out of their sight. The city began to change. Streets emptied earlier in the evenings, shops closed before dark, and a tense silence settled over neighborhoods. Every shadow, every parked car, every stranger felt like a threat. The Lake Beressa attack. On September 27, 1969, the Zodiac struck again. College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were relaxing by Lake Beressa, enjoying a peaceful day near the water. Suddenly, a man dressed in black, with a hood and a circle cross symbol on his chest, approached them. He claimed he needed money and a car to escape. He tied their hands and feet, but instead of leaving, he drew a knife and attacked. Brian survived, but Cecilia tragically died in the hospital 2 days later. Shockingly, the Zodiac himself called the police from a payphone, reporting the crime in a calm, collected voice before hanging up. By the time police arrived at the phone booth, the Zodiac had vanished. An invisible terror grips the city. Each new letter and attack deepened the fear across California. The Zodiac seemed to slip through every police net, leaving behind taunting messages while maintaining his freedom. Detectives worked day and night, but the Zodiac always stayed one step ahead. Hiding in plain sight among the people of the city, he held hostage in fear. This was no ordinary murderer. The Zodiac was creating a legacy of fear, mystery, and unanswered questions that would haunt California for decades to come. He wasn't finished. He had only just begun his game. The letters that froze a city August 1969, the sunlit streets of San Francisco felt heavier, burdened by a fear that settled over every neighborhood. One by one, letters began arriving at newspaper offices, each ending with a chilling sign-off. Greater than this is the Zodiac speaking. The letters were calm, yet cold, describing details of the murders that only the killer could know. Each carried the circle with cross symbol that was quickly becoming a mark of fear across Northern California. Parents held their children's hands tighter. People checked their rearview mirrors twice before driving, and each shadow on the sidewalk felt like it might hide a stranger watching, waiting. A city on edge? Newspapers published every letter, hoping someone would recognize the handwriting or clues hidden within. But the letters only spread more fear. People avoided parking in quiet places at night. Couples who once enjoyed late-night drives now stayed home. Schools remained open, but parents watched anxiously as yellow buses rolled away each morning. Zodiac had achieved what he wanted. He had turned fear into a weapon. Police under pressure, detectives worked around the clock, piecing together evidence from crime scenes, handwriting samples, and witness statements. But Zodiac was like a ghost, leaving no fingerprints, no traceable clues, only letters and fear in his wake. They began compiling suspect lists, following tips from citizens who claimed to have seen suspicious neighbors or coworkers. The police checked out dozens of leads, but none led to Zodiac. In the midst of this, the public began sending in their own theories and decoded parts of the cipher, trying to help catch the man who haunted their city. It became a community's mission to stop the fear that was spreading like wildfire. A taunting phone call, then came another chilling moment. On October 11, 1969, Zodiac struck again. Paul Stein, a 29-year-old taxi driver, was working his shift in San Francisco's Presidio Heights neighborhood. A man hailed his cab and asked to be taken to Washington and Maple Streets. But when they arrived, the passenger shot Paul in the head and stole his wallet, keys, and tore a piece of Paul's shirt before slipping away into the night. Children in nearby houses witnessed the man wiping down the cab and calmly walking away, blending into the quiet streets of the neighborhood. When the police arrived, they initially thought it was a robbery. But soon, the Zodiac himself claimed responsibility in a letter, sending the stolen piece of Paul Stein's bloody shirt to prove it was him. Letters with threats in his next letters. Zodiac claimed he would target school buses, threatening to attack children if his messages weren't printed in the newspapers. This sent waves of panic across the city and surrounding towns. Police cars began escorting school buses, officers watched bus stops, and parents refused to let their children walk alone. Every parent in San Francisco lived in fear that the Zodiac might strike when they least expected it. The puzzle of his identity. Despite the growing list of murders Zodiac claimed, the police struggled to confirm which ones were truly his. Zodiac boasted of dozens of victims, but evidence was often unclear. He mocked the police for failing to catch him, writing, "I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." Zodiac was not just committing crimes. He was playing a game with the city, law enforcement, and the media, taunting them with every letter, every coded message, and every threat. Witnesses and sketches. The children who saw Zodiac leaving Paul Stein's cab described him as a heavy-set man with glasses and a crew-cut hairstyle. A composite sketch was made and printed across newspapers and distributed to police units, hoping someone would recognize the face of the man behind the terror, but no one came forward with a clear match. The sketch became one of the most recognized images in American true crime history, a face that represented fear, yet remained unnamed. Police mistakes and missed chances. During the initial response to Paul Stein's murder, police officers reportedly saw a man matching Zodiac's description walking near the crime scene, but did not stop him believing the suspect to be African American based on an early incorrect report. This mistake allowed Zodiac to slip away, leaving officers and detectives frustrated. Every missed opportunity felt like letting the city down as the killer continued his game. Codebreakers and the public's involvement. Citizens, teachers, and amateur codebreakers continued to work on Zodiac's ciphers, hoping to find a clue that would reveal his identity. People debated whether the codes were real clues, or just another way for Zodiac to maintain control over the narrative. Every cracked cipher brought hope, but they offered no clear path to his arrest. A city held hostage by fear. By the end of 1969, San Francisco and surrounding areas were living under the shadow of the Zodiac. Every letter was front-page news. Every new murder, or claim of murder, brought fresh waves of fear. The Zodiac wasn't just a killer. He was an unseen threat that seemed to be everywhere, yet nowhere. He knew how to use fear as a weapon, controlling a city with words, puzzles, and the fear that he could strike again at any moment. The unending mystery. While detectives kept investigating leads, the Zodiac continued to send letters. His boldness grew as he taunted the police, confident that he could not be caught. He wanted the world to know his name, to remember the symbol he used, and to fear the possibility that he might return. This was not the end. The Zodiac's game had only just begun. A day that turned dark. It was September 27, 1969. The sun was shining over Lake Berryessa in Napa County, California. College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were enjoying a peaceful afternoon by the lake, sitting on a blanket, studying, laughing, and talking about their futures. They noticed a man in the distance. At first they didn't think much of him, assuming he was another visitor enjoying the day. But as he got closer, they realized he was wearing something unusual, a dark hood covering his head like an executioner's mask with clip-on sunglasses over the eye holes and a symbol on his chest, a white cross inside a circle. It was the symbol of the Zodiac. The approach. Brian and Cecilia watched as the man approached, holding a gun. Calmly, he told them he was an escaped convict who needed money and a car to get to Mexico. He assured them he meant no harm, but his calm voice and strange outfit created a heavy fear in the air. Zodiac ordered Cecilia to tie Brian's wrists with pre-cut pieces of plastic clothesline. Then he tied Cecilia, but instead of leaving with their belongings, he took out a large knife. Without warning, Zodiac began stabbing them. Brian was stabbed 6 times in the back, and Cecilia was stabbed 10 times as she lay on the ground. The peaceful afternoon turned into a scene of horror. Leaving his mark. Before leaving, Zodiac took out a black felt-tip pen and wrote on the door of Brian's Volkswagen, Carmen Gia, greater than Vallejo, December 20th, 68, the 4th of July, 69, Sep 27 to 69 to 6:30. These were the dates of his previous attacks, and now, this new one. The chilling phone call around 7:40 p.m. that evening. A call came in to the Napa County Sheriff's Office. The voice on the other end was calm, emotionless. "I want to report a murder. No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters." They were in a white Volkswagen, Carmen Gia. When the operator asked for his identity, the caller simply said, "I'm the one who did it," and hung up. The phone call was traced to a payphone in Napa, blocks away from the sheriff's office. Fingerprints were found on the receiver, but they led nowhere. A fight for survival. Miraculously, Brian survived the brutal attack. Cecilia was found alive but in critical condition. Despite medical efforts, Cecilia died 2 days later in the hospital. Brian later described Zodiac's outfit and the events with chilling clarity, providing details that matched Zodiac's letters and confirmed that the same man was behind the Lake Berryessa attack. Fear deepens across California. News of the attack spread rapidly. It wasn't just gun attacks and parked cars anymore. Zodiac had now approached victims in daylight, wearing a terrifying costume, and attacked with a knife. The people of California realized that Zodiac was evolving and growing bolder. People avoided lakes and secluded parks, locking their doors even during the day. Couples who once spent weekends by the lake now stayed home, afraid that Zodiac could appear at any moment. The ciphers and the letters continue. After the Lake Berryessa attack, Zodiac continued sending letters to the press. He described the attack in detail, even mentioning the brand of the knife he used, proving his identity as the killer. In one letter, he included a piece of Paul Stein's bloody which he had taken after the San Francisco taxi driver's murder. This was undeniable proof of his claims, but it was his ciphers that continued to captivate and terrify the public. Zodiac claimed that his codes would reveal his identity if solved, but despite intense efforts from codebreakers and the police, the messages remained largely unclear. The ciphers contained strange symbols, coded letters, in taunting lines that showcased Zodiac's desire for control, attention, and fear. The investigation intensifies. Detectives from multiple counties, including Vallejo, Napa, and San Francisco, began collaborating to catch Zodiac. Hundreds of suspects were investigated, handwriting samples were collected, and psychological profiles were developed. Police checked hospitals for individuals seeking treatment for wounds after the attacks, hoping Zodiac might have injured himself, but found no match. The FBI also joined the investigation, as Zodiac's crimes crossed county lines, and his letters threatened public safety. The public's fascination and fear as the investigation continued. Zodiac became a dark legend in California. True crime enthusiasts, amateur codebreakers, and ordinary citizens began studying the letters, hoping to be the one to crack the code and end the fear. Newspapers received countless letters from people claiming to know who Zodiac was, but none provided credible leads. Tip lines rang constantly with rumors, suspicions, and theories. The public's fear was mixed with fascination. Zodiac had managed to turn himself into a chilling symbol, and every new letter felt like a dark chapter unfolding in real time. Justice delayed. Despite Zodiac's continued taunts, the investigation struggled to catch up. He was careful, calculated, and always one step ahead. His attacks seemed random, making it difficult to predict his next move. For the families of the victims, each day was a painful reminder that their loved one's killer was still free, sending letters and laughing at the authorities trying to catch him. A city living with shadows. By the end of California was living under the shadow of Zodiac's threats. He wasn't just a killer anymore. He was an unseen presence, using fear as a tool and control as a weapon. The Zodiac had promised he would continue, and with each letter, the fear deepened. As the new year approached, people wondered, greater than when will he strike again? This was not the end. Zodiac's game was far from over. The fear continues as 1969 turned into 1970. Northern California remained under a cloud of fear. Parents still checked their rearview mirrors twice before driving their children to school. Couples stayed indoors, and strangers were eyed with suspicion. The Zodiac had promised he would continue, and the people believed him. While the physical attacks seemed to pause, the Zodiac's letters did not. He continued to send taunting messages to newspapers, claiming new victims and mocking the police for their inability to catch him. The Zodiac was not just committing crimes. He was shaping a narrative, ensuring that fear remained alive. The 340-character cipher. On November 8th, the Zodiac sent one of his most infamous letters to the San Francisco Chronicle. Inside was a complex cipher containing 340 characters. The letter claimed, "This is the Zodiac speaking. I hope you are having lots of fun trying to catch me." He taunted the police and public, suggesting that the cipher contained his identity if they could solve it. Code breakers across the nation, from military cryptologists to amateur enthusiasts, tried to crack the 340-character cipher, but for decades, it remained unsolved, a puzzle that continued to haunt investigators and true crime followers. Note, this cipher was eventually solved in 2020, but you may choose to keep this suspense in your video, or reveal it in Part 8, for viewer retention. The letters grow darker. The Zodiac's letters weren't just filled with taunts. They also contained threats. He claimed to have planted bombs across the city and sent diagrams of supposed explosive devices, claiming he would use them if his demands were not met. He threatened to target school buses again, repeating his horrifying claim that he would pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out. These threats were taken seriously. Police and the public remained vigilant. School buses were monitored, and roads were watched. Yet, the Zodiac never carried out these bomb threats, leaving the city in a constant state of alert. False confessions and hoaxes. The fame of the Zodiac case led to a flood of hoax letters and false confessions. People called police departments, claiming to be the Zodiac, or sent letters pretending to be him. Each call and letter had to be investigated, taking time and resources away from the real investigation. Some letters were obvious fakes, lacking details only the real Zodiac would know. Others were convincing enough to require analysis. The Zodiac seemed to enjoy the chaos, mentioning in his letters how people were imitating him, as if it amused him that he had created an army of shadows. A frustrating investigation. Detectives from San Francisco, Vallejo, Napa, and state agencies worked tirelessly. They followed leads, checked suspects, and compared handwriting samples with Zodiac's letters. Hundreds of suspects were investigated, but none could be definitively linked to the murders. Handwriting experts matched and dismissed countless samples, and fingerprints from the Paul Stine murder scene were checked against suspects without success. A psychological profile of the Zodiac suggested he was intelligent. Yet, despite their efforts, investigators found themselves chasing a ghost. The media and the Zodiac. The media played a significant role in the Zodiac case. His letters were often published on the front pages, as the Zodiac demanded. Some criticized newspapers for giving him the attention he craved, while others argued that publishing his letters might prevent further violence. The Zodiac understood the power of the media. He controlled the narrative, ensuring he remained the center of attention. He turned the fear of a city into a twisted form of entertainment, delivering fear through the morning paper. Witness accounts and dead ends. Witness descriptions from the Paul Stine murder and other sightings provided police with a composite sketch. The image of a stocky man with glasses became widely circulated, but no arrest followed. Potential suspects emerged, including individuals with criminal records, odd behavior, or connections to the areas where the murders took place. Yet, no suspect's handwriting matched perfectly with the Zodiac's letters, and no physical evidence could tie anyone definitively to the crimes. The investigation felt like chasing shadows just when the police thought they were close. The trail went cold. Technological limitations of the time. The Zodiac case was hindered by the technology of the ER. Fingerprint databases were limited, and DNA analysis did not yet exist. The Zodiac's careful avoidance of leaving physical evidence made him even harder to catch. Letters were checked for fingerprints, but only partial prints were recovered, and they did not match anyone in the system. The killer's planning and caution allowed him to stay ahead of law enforcement, adding to his legend. The fear that wouldn't leave. By the end of 1970, the Zodiac's reign of fear continued. His last confirmed murder was Paul Stine's in October 1969, but his letters made it clear he was still present, watching, and willing to strike again. Each new letter reopened wounds in the community and among the victims' families, who watched in frustration as the man responsible for their loved ones' deaths continued to mock them publicly. For the people of California, the Zodiac was more than a criminal. He was a reminder that safety could be shattered, that evil could walk among them, and that sometimes evil could hide in plain sight. A puzzle with no answer. The Zodiac had promised more murders and claimed to have killed dozens, but his true victim count remains unknown. His letters continued into the early 1970s, with taunts and cryptic messages, some confirmed as authentic, others likely hoaxes. The case was becoming one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Detectives continued to search, hoping for one lead, one slip, one piece of evidence that could unmask the man behind the symbol. But the Zodiac was careful, and as the 1970s continued, he slowly faded from the headlines, leaving behind fear, sorrow, and questions that would last for decades. The shadows remained. The Zodiac's promise that he would never be caught seemed to be true. The ciphers remained unsolved, the killer remained and the people who lived through those years of fear would never forget the man who turned their lives into a nightmare. This was not the end. The Zodiac's shadow would continue to haunt California and the world for years to come. The search for the Zodiac's identity. By the early 1970s, the Zodiac case had grown into one of the largest criminal investigations in American history. Law enforcement agencies across California, along with the FBI, were determined to unmask the man behind the symbol that haunted an entire region. The Zodiac's letters continued to arrive, but they gave no clear path to his identity. Detectives were left with a puzzle of taunts, cryptic ciphers, and a growing list of victims, both confirmed and those the Zodiac claimed. It was time to look closely at potential suspects. The ciphers, clues, or distractions. While many hoped the Zodiac ciphers would reveal his identity, each coded message seemed more like a trap to waste time and confuse investigators. The first cipher had been solved by a schoolteacher and his wife, but it revealed no name, only disturbing ramblings about killing being more fun than killing wild game. The infamous 340-character cipher, unsolved for decades, became an obsession for some believed the Zodiac hid his name within these symbols, while others felt the codes were designed to keep the police busy, feeding the Zodiac's desire for control and attention. The main suspect, Arthur Lee Allen. Among the hundreds of suspects investigated, one name stood out: Arthur Lee Allen. Allen was a former schoolteacher and Navy veteran living in Vallejo, California. He owned a typewriter similar to the one used in some Zodiac letters, and wore a Zodiac-style watch, featuring the same circle with cross symbol. In 1971, a friend of Allen told police that Allen had talked about wanting to kill people and used the name Zodiac. Allen also reportedly owned a knife similar to the one used in the Lake Beressa attack. When Allen was questioned, he denied being the Zodiac. Police searched his home, finding small animals preserved in jars, illegal weapons, and cryptic notes, but nothing that definitively tied him to the Zodiac murders. The handwriting and fingerprint dilemma. Handwriting experts compared Allen's writing to the Zodiac letters but did not find a conclusive match. Fingerprints found on Paul Stine's taxi and the letters did not match Allen's prints either. Despite the circumstantial evidence and Allen's suspicious behavior, there was no direct proof that he was the Zodiac. The police kept him under surveillance, but the Zodiac letters continued to arrive during this period, further confusing investigators. Arthur Lee Allen remained the prime suspect in the public's mind, but legally, he was just one of many potential suspects. Missed opportunities and dead ends over the years. Police faced many moments where they felt they were close to capturing the Zodiac, but each lead turned cold. Witnesses described seeing a man near Paul Stine's taxi, but initial miscommunication about the suspect's race allowed the Zodiac to walk past officers unnoticed. Tips from the public led to interviews with suspicious individuals, but none yielded evidence strong enough for an arrest. Letters from supposed Zodiac impersonators distracted the investigation, forcing detectives to spend resources confirming authenticity. Every mischance felt like letting the killer slip further away. Possible additional victims. The Zodiac claimed to have killed as many as 37 people, far more than the confirmed 5 murders linked to him. Over the years, investigators reviewed unsolved murders and disappearances in California and beyond, searching for connections to the Zodiac. Among these potential cases, Sherry Jo Bates, a college student murdered in Riverside, California, with taunting letters sent to the police afterward. Some believe this was an early Zodiac killing. Kathleen Johns, a woman who claimed the Zodiac abducted her and her baby, driving them around for hours before she escaped. The Zodiac later claimed responsibility in a letter. Donna Lass, a nurse who disappeared in Lake Tahoe, with a postcard sent to the Chronicle suggesting Zodiac's involvement. While these cases contained eerie similarities, no definitive link to the Zodiac could be proven, leaving families without answers. The public's role in the investigation. The Zodiac case turned many members of the public into amateur detectives. People from all walks of life analyzed the ciphers, handwriting, and timelines, hoping to find what professionals could not. Newspapers received countless letters from citizens sharing theories, suspects, and alleged clues. Some tips were helpful, but many were distractions fueled by fear, curiosity, and the desire for recognition. The case was no longer just a police matter. It had become a mystery that captured America's imagination. Media pressure and its impact. Media coverage kept the Zodiac in the spotlight, but it also created challenges for law enforcement. The Zodiac enjoyed the attention, often referencing newspaper stories in his letters, using the press to fuel his game. Police faced the delicate balance of informing the public while avoiding giving the Zodiac the fame he sought. The letters, published on front pages, increased public fear, while also keeping potential clues available for those who might recognize handwriting or details. The frustration of the victims' families. While the Zodiac continued his game with the public and police, the victims' families lived with a deeper pain. For them, the Zodiac was not a mystery or a puzzle, but the person who had stolen their loved ones. Each letter felt like an insult to their grief. Each newspaper headline was a reminder that the killer was still free. The lack of justice became a constant wound in their lives, pushing detectives to keep searching despite years of dead ends. A case that haunts to this day. By the mid-1970s, Zodiac's confirmed letters slowed, but the fear he created remained. Suspects came and went, theories were debated, but the true identity of the Zodiac remained elusive. Arthur Lee Allen died in 1992, never charged with the Zodiac crimes, and many believed the truth died with him. Others continue to believe that the Zodiac is still out there, hidden in plain sight. An ordinary man who managed to outwit law enforcement and leave behind a trail of fear that would echo for generations. The puzzle remains unsolved. The Zodiac case stands as a reminder of how one person's darkness can overshadow an entire community. It shows how fear can spread through letters, symbols, and whispers in the night, leaving scars that last far beyond the crimes themselves. The Zodiac once promised he would never be caught. So far, he has kept that promise, but the search for the Zodiac's identity isn't over. Someone, somewhere, knows the truth. The Zodiac once stared into the eyes of the world and said, "They will never catch me." Decades later, the world still wonders, was he right? Or is the truth closer than we think? In our next episode, we're diving deeper into the hidden letters, strange symbols, and chilling theories that might finally reveal who the Zodiac really was. If you love true crime and haunting mysteries, subscribe now and hit the bell icon so you don't miss what's coming next. Who do you think the Zodiac was? Drop your theory in the comments below. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, the shadows are never truly empty.